Hello everyone! Welcome to my very own virtual classroom. And a virtual classroom, you say? What is that? It's where we meet online instead of actually meeting in a physical classroom. We are meeting online over video. So I made my own kind of classroom setup. I put my name, Miss Farrar, that's what you guys call me, so I went ahead and put that on my wall. And yeah, so we're in my virtual classroom, and today we're going to read another read aloud, but instead of doing just the reading, we're also going to do some writing. So, if you don't have this already, you're going to need a piece of paper, and you're going to need something to write with on your piece of paper. And if you don't have those yet, I want you guys to go ahead and pause this video and go grab those things, okay? Because we are going to need it in our activity or our lesson. All right. And today we are reading the book, The Relatives Came. All right. And this story is by Cynthia, Rylant, and illustrated by Gammell. Okay, and we're going to do what we did last week. And we're going to form our very own, what was it called? Prediction. You're very right. So we're going to form our very own prediction. We're going to come up with what we think might happen in this book, and then we're going to test out our prediction by the end to see if that actually happened. Okay, so we're going to write our prediction this time. So last time you kind of just came up with it on your own in your head, but this time we're actually going to write it. So you guys really need your piece of paper and your pencil, so if you don't have those yet, go ahead and pause this video, and I'm going to help us come up with our prediction, okay? And when we're forming our prediction, before we open the book, we're going to look at the cover photo of the book, or the illustration, because this is more of a picture, or an illustration that someone drew. So we can see there's a car, there's some people in the car. We might want to think about who those people are, what's on top of their car, where they are, where they're driving to. But we also want to pay attention to our title, because the title can tell us a lot about a story, right? And this one kind of does tell us a lot. So it says, the relatives came. In this word relatives, you might not know what that means, but it's okay if you don't know, because we'll figure out in the book, and we might find some context clues to help us. Okay, so I want you guys to look at the picture, look at the title, and come up with your own prediction. And I will actually help you start what your sentence is going to look like for your prediction. And I have my very own whiteboard. It's like a little small whiteboard. And I'm going to put a P and a dash like that, just to know that this was my prediction, okay? This is what's going to happen, or what I think is going to happen, okay? So I would write, in the story, the relatives came, and we have to underline this title of the story, right? So in the story, the relatives came, I think blank, okay? So that's what your sentence should look like. So in the story, the relatives came, I think blank. And you guys are going to fill in that blank for me, okay? So you're just going to have one sentence for your prediction. I will put that P right there so you know that's your prediction. And then we're going to come back to this at the end of the story to see if your prediction was right, okay? So take a couple more minutes to write your prediction down, okay? And I'll let you have some time to look at what I wrote and write it on your paper. Okay, and if you need some extra time, you want to just pause this video right here, you can go ahead and do that, okay? All right, we're going to get started with our book, though. The relatives came. I don't know why I flipped around the book, but maybe that just helps me a little bit. For Aunt Agnes Little and her brood, Dick Jackson and his Gary and ours. Okay, let me make sure that you guys can see all of the pictures. It was in the summer of the year when the relatives came. They came up from Virginia. They left when their grapes were nearly purple enough to pick, but not quite. They had an old station wagon that smelled like a real car, and in it they put an ice chest full of soda pop and some boxes of crackers and some bologna sandwiches, and up they came from Virginia. They left at 4 in the morning when it was still dark, before even the birds were awake. Have you guys ever went anywhere at 4 in the morning or traveled? Because sometimes if it's a long trip, we've got to travel really early. So maybe that's why they left early. They drove all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses in different mountains, and they thought about their almost purple grapes back home. They thought about Virginia, but they thought about us too, waiting for them. I wonder who us two are. Who's waiting for them? So they drank up all their pop and ate up all their crackers and traveled up those miles until finally they pulled into our yard. Look what's happening. Oh no, the car is crashing into the fence. Uh-oh. And who are those people? Then it was hugging time. Talk about hugging. Those relatives just passed us all around their car, pulling us up against their wrinkled Virginia clothes, crying sometimes. They hugged us for hours. So they're hugging. So let's go back to that word relatives. What does that mean? Maybe it means family. People that are in your family. People that are related to you, because that's why they're relatives, right? They're related to you. Maybe your cousins, your aunts and uncles, or your grandparents, your step-grandparents, or your step-brothers or sisters. They're all relatives, right? And they're hugging each other. So right now, we're doing everything virtually, and you're not able to hug your relatives, right? Because they either live far away or they don't live in the same house as you. So would we hug them right now, or would we wait to hug them? And think about, how would we communicate with them if we're not able to go to their house right now? How would we communicate with them? We'll come back to that later, okay? And they hugged for hours. Then it was into the house, and so much laughing and shining faces and hugging in the doorways, you'd have to go through at least 4 different hugs to get from the kitchen to the front room. Those relatives. Look, they're filling up the whole house. It's almost like a family reunion. You ever been to a family reunion? Maybe that's what they're doing. And finally, after a big supper 2 or 3 times around until we got a turn at the table, there was quiet talk, and we were in 2s and 3s through the house. So there, it looks like they're getting some food and they're eating together and talking. The relatives weren't particular about beds, which was good since there weren't any extras, so a few squeezed in with us and the rest slept on the floor, some with their arms thrown over the closest person, or some with an arm across one person and a leg across another. It was different going to sleep with all that new breathing in the house. So sometimes when you go to see your relatives, do you guys have to squeeze into your cousin's bed, or do you have to sleep in a different spot than you normally sleep? But right now we probably wouldn't try and squish into someone else's bed because we need our social distancing. Have you guys heard that before? That's what we're doing now to keep the spread of this virus from spreading. So we probably would keep our distance instead of sleeping in similar beds. We probably wouldn't get to be so close. And you see where it says new breathing in the house? The relatives stayed for weeks and weeks. They helped us tend the garden and they fixed any broken things they could find. Oh man, this person has a lot of relatives, right? Someone's cutting hair. They ate up all our strawberries and melons, then promised we could eat up all their grapes and peaches when we came to Virginia. But none of us thought about Virginia much. We were so busy hugging and eating and breathing together. Finally, after a long time, the relatives loaded up their ice chests and headed back to Virginia at 4 in the morning. We stood there in our pajamas and waved them off in the dark. We watched the relatives disappear down the road. Then we crawled back into our beds that felt so big and too quiet. We fell asleep. So there's their family waving goodbye to their relatives as they're traveling along at 4 a.m. in the morning. And the relatives drove on all day long and into the night, and while they traveled along, they looked at the strange houses in different mountains, and they thought about their dark purple grapes waiting at home in Virginia. But they thought about us too, missing them, and they missed us. And when they were finally home in Virginia, they crawled into their silent, soft beds and dreamed about the next summer. Oh, and there's those grapes. So that was a good book, wasn't it? Have you guys ever went to visit your relatives during the summer? And you probably missed them, right? So let's go back to your prediction and see if your prediction was right. What did you think that was going to happen in the books? In the book, The Relatives Came. Okay, look at your prediction and see if you were correct. You could even put a check mark if you were, but if you weren't, that's okay. We kind of figured out what was going to happen in the book by reading it. All right, and so we talked about some things like social distancing and how we can't really hug our relatives right now, or we can't really sleep near them or breathe near them. We've got to keep our social distance, right? So I want you guys to write in a couple of sentences how you would communicate with your relatives right now. What would you have to do instead of hugging them or going to their house? What could you do? How could you do something maybe virtual? What would you say to them? Could you write them a letter? Could you video call them? Is there something else that we could do to get in contact with our relatives, to communicate with them? All right, so if you chose to write a letter, I want you to write a letter to one of your relatives and ask them some questions, tell them how you're doing, or ask them how they're doing. And then maybe you and your parents can figure out how to mail your letter to your relatives. Or if you decide to video call your relative, what would you say to them? So come up with a conversation or something to write that you would tell your relatives about and what they might tell you. And you guys could actually video chat them if your parent tells you that it's okay. Okay? So I hope you guys enjoyed the book. And I hope you guys had fun. Just make sure that you write something, okay? All right, I'll see you guys next time.